The vital signs of betrayal. Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe. In cardiovascular surgery, you learn something most people never do. The heart does not negotiate. It either tells the truth or it dies trying. A valve either seals or it leaks. Muscle either lives or it goes dark. And when you're standing over an open chest with a scalpel in your hand, there is no room for maybe. No room for optimism, no room for excuses. That mindset saved strangers, it just didn't save my marriage. And the worst part, by the time I realized my wife was lying to me, I already knew exactly what I was looking at. I just didn't want the diagnosis to be real. My name is Marcus Vale. I'm a cardiovascular surgeon. I spent most of my adult life reading warning signs before other people even felt symptoms. Jagged EKG patterns, failing valves, pressure drift. Tiny irregularities that tell you a catastrophe is coming before the patient has enough pain to call it one. That was my life patterns, systems, rhythm, deviation. So when my 12-year marriage started losing its rhythm, I noticed. Quietly, long before my wife thought I would. At first, I told myself it was stress. That's how these things begin. Not with lipstick on a collar. Not with a stranger's text flashing on a screen. Not with a dramatic reveal and some cinematic line that changes your life in a second. It begins with timing. That's what got me first. For more than a decade, Alina's life had moved with the clean precision of a school schedule. Wake the kids' breakfast, drop off groceries, laundry. Pick up homework, dinners. The invisible machinery that keeps a household from slipping into chaos. It wasn't glamorous, but it was consistent. Then the consistency started to fracture. A trip to the grocery store became 90 minutes. A pharmacy run drifted into late afternoon. A volunteer meeting stretched past dinner. A charity event she had recently started helping with began swallowing entire evenings. At first, none of it was dramatic enough to confront. That's what makes betrayal so dangerous. If it started as something obvious, most people would stop it early. Instead, it starts in the gray area. Small enough to dismiss. Frequent enough to matter. She told me she was helping organize a local charity gala. The coordinator, she said, was a man named Julian. High-end event planners. Stylish. Demanding. Intense. She rolled her eyes when she said his name. Looking back, that was probably the first lie I should have heard clearly. Because fake annoyance is one of the oldest disguises attraction has. It's just a way to feel useful, Marcus, she told me one night at the kitchen island. The kids were upstairs. The dishwasher was running. The house looked exactly like a life I thought I understood. They're getting older. I just wanted something that felt adult again. That answer made sense. Too much sense. That was part of the problem. I knew my hours had cost us things. I knew there were nights I came home so exhausted I could barely sit through dinner. Weekends I disappeared into emergency procedures. Holidays where my pager mattered more than the meal in front of me. I knew what it meant for a woman to build her life around a family and then one day look up and realize everyone still needed her. But no one was really seeing her. So I listened. I gave her room. And while I was giving her room, she was giving someone else access. The change in her schedule was the first warning. The change in her tone was the second. When people tell the truth, their answers have a kind of natural weight to them. When people lie, they don't just change their words. They change their frequency. Julian was intense. Julian was good at fundraising. Julian was a lot. Julian was kind of unbearable but effective. But the moment I asked simple questions, where the meetings were, who else was there, why they ran so late, what exactly required her to be out past 10 with her phone off, her voice sharpened. Not scared, defensive. Don't start checking my vitals like I'm one of your patients, she snapped once. Then she laughed like she wanted the line to pass as playful. It didn't. I smiled. But internally, I marked it. Because when people get angry at questions that should have easy answers, it usually means the answer itself is the threat. Then came the phone. Before all of this, Alina had never been precious about it. She left it on counters, in the car, in couch cushions, buried under unopened mails. Sometimes she'd lose it for hours and ask one of the kids to call it. Then suddenly it was always with her. Always, face down at dinner, in the bathroom, under her pillow, on the nightstand angled away from me. More than once, I came downstairs after midnight and saw her in the family room with the pale light of the screen reflected across her face. Some moving quickly, smile forming, then disappearing the second she heard me. Can't sleep, I asked once. Just scrolling, she said. But she wasn't scrolling. Scrolling doesn't make a woman look like she's being seen. That was when the first real thought entered my mind. Not suspicion. Not yet. Something colder. A question. What exactly was changing in my house when I wasn't home to watch it? The cruel thing about betrayal is that when it first begins to take shape, the person being betrayed usually has enough self-awareness to doubt themselves. And I doubted myself. Because Alina knew where my weak points were. Every time I pushed even lightly, she pushed back harder. My hours, my emotional distance, my clinical personality, the way I analyzed instead of felt. She started talking about me like I was some sterile machine in scrubs that occasionally wandered through the house between surgeries. And there was just enough truth in that to make it dangerous. That's how manipulation works. It doesn't invent a lie from nothing. It attaches itself to your guilt. And I had guilt. I had missed recitals, missed dinners, missed the texture of certain seasons in my own children's lives because I was inside operating rooms saving other people's fathers, wives, mothers, sons. I had told myself I was doing it for my family. Maybe I was, but I had also made it easy for Alina to feel alone. So when she called me detached, part of me listened. When she called me paranoid, part of me hesitated. That hesitation cost me time. Not much, but enough to let the infection spread. The first hard piece of evidence came on a Thursday. I had just finished a 6-hour bypass. My shoulders were tight. My throat was dry. My face still carried the pressure marks from the mask. I was in the physician's locker room trying to drink a cup of bad coffee when Aaron walked in. Aaron was an orthopedic surgeon. Quiet guy, married, 2 daughters, the kind of man who never spoke unless he had a reason. He stood there holding his bag for a second too long. Then he said, "Marcus, I need to ask you something. And I'm asking because if it were me, I'd want someone to ask me." You hear enough bad news in medicine, and eventually you develop an ear for it before the words even arrive. The body knows tone before language. I set the coffee down. He told me he'd been out the night before with his family at an outdoor restaurant. He wasn't looking for anything. He just happened to glance across the patio and saw Alina at a corner table with a man in a charcoal jacket. Wine, candles, leaning in too far. Not business posture, not committee posture. Something softer, something private. Could be innocent, he said carefully. But the look on his face said he didn't believe that. Neither did I thanked him. He apologized. Then he left me alone with the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels surgical. That night I didn't confront her. That surprises people when they hear this story. They expect anger right there. A slammed door. A demand. A showdown at the kitchen table. But anger is noisy. And noise scares evidence back into hiding. So I waited. She came home at 10:43 p.m. I remember the exact minute because by then I had already started doing what I do best. Tracking rhythm. She walked in carrying 2 thin garment bags and an expression that looked rehearsed before she even saw me sitting at the table. "You're up late," she said. "So are you." She put the bags down carefully. "We had a whole issue with donor cards and linens and seating changes." I nodded once. "Who's we?" She opened the refrigerator even though she clearly wasn't hungry. "The committee, which members?" That was the moment she turned. Not hurt, not confused, annoyed. I still remember the kitchen light on the edge of her face, the tension around her mouth, the way her exhaustion looked performed instead of lived. "Why are you interrogating me?" I said nothing. That was deliberate. Silence is a better scalpel than accusation. People rush to fill it. And she did. Names, logistics, floral delays, venue changes, committee talk. It was almost impressive. Not because it was flawless, because it was plausible. That's what made it dangerous. A bad liar is easy to catch. A practiced liar gives you just enough truth to make your own instincts feel impolite. By the following Wednesday, the atmosphere in our home felt like a recovery room where the patient isn't waking up when they should. Everything looked stable from across the room. But if you knew what to look for, the system was failing. Alina became hyper-attentive. That was new. She cooked meals she hadn't made in years, touched my shoulder when she passed behind my chair, asked about my day with a softness that felt slightly over-designed. One night she made filet mignon with a red wine reduction and wore the diamond earrings I bought her for our 10th anniversary. The whole evening had the energy of a commercial for marriage, which was exactly the problem. It looked too polished, too intentional, like a cosmetic correction over something rupturing underneath. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she said over dinner, reaching across the table. "I know I've been busy. I just want us to focus on us." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't challenge her. I didn't ask who taught her to suddenly remember how to act devoted. I just watched. That's what she didn't understand. At that point, I had stopped listening to the words. I was studying the performance. Her hand rested on mine. "I love you," she whispered. "You're the heart of this family." That line would have broken some men. Pulled them back toward hope. Made them grateful enough to stop asking questions. But I'm a surgeon. And when a graft isn't taking, you don't cover it with a prettier bandage and pretend the body has accepted it. You look for rejection. You find the source. So that's what I did. I hired a private investigator. Quietly, no drama, no speech, no late-night argument where she could adjust her tactics. Just facts. Dates, times, locations, names. I gave him the charity organization, the schedule shifts, the neighborhoods, and Julian's full name. Then I started documenting things myself. Not obsessively, systematically. Departure times, return times, card charges that didn't match explanations, mood shifts, phone behaviors, patterns of absence. The private investigator's first report came back in 4 days. Photos, time-stamped. Alina leaving a cafe with Julian in the middle of a weekday afternoon, after telling me she was helping with school volunteer coordination. Alina entering a downtown wine bar at 8:11 p.m. Alina exiting at 10:02 p.m., Julian's hand at the small of her back. Both of them in a hotel lounge corner, with the body language of people who had already crossed internal lines long before they crossed visible ones. I sat with those photos in my home office and felt something strange. Not rage, relief. Because uncertainty is its own kind of torture. Once reality has a face, pain becomes cleaner. You stop guessing. You start planning. And that was when this stopped being a marriage problem and became an operation. A second layer of proof came from a direction I didn't expect. A colleague from another hospital, Dev, asked me to meet him privately after a conference session. Parking garage, concrete pillars, low fluorescent light, the sort of place where people bring truths they don't want echoed in hallways. He told me his wife had seen Alina and Julian together at a charity preview event the weekend before. Not talking, not standing too close, acting like a couple, laughing with the lazy confidence of people who believed the room belonged to them. His wife had taken photos. She had done it for one reason. If that were me, she said, I'd want proof before someone tried to comfort me with doubt. Those photos were worse than the first ones. Because the first set showed access, the second set showed ease. There is something uniquely brutal about seeing the person you married become casual in their betrayal. Casual means practiced. Casual means repeated. Casual means this isn't an accident. It's a lifestyle. That night I sat in my car in the driveway for nearly 20 minutes before going inside. I wasn't crying. I was triaging what the kids would need, what the legal process would look like, what the financial separation would become, what could be proved, what needed better timing, what kind of ending left me with control instead of chaos. People think betrayal makes a man wild. Sometimes it does. But for some of us, betrayal makes us cold. And cold can be very efficient. I confronted Julian the next afternoon, not because I thought he would suddenly discover a conscience, because I wanted to hear how he talked when he thought he'd already won. I found him in an upscale lounge near the charity offices. Of course I did. He was sitting exactly the way men like him always sit, like the room had been arranged for their ego. Tailored jacket, silk tie, expensive watch, teeth too white, confidence too polished. When he saw me, he smiled. The surgeon, he said. Alina said you were the observant type. I stood there long enough to make him rise. I'm going to say this once, I told him. Stay away from my wife. He smiled like he thought this was flirting in another dialect. Your wife seems capable of making her own decisions. This ends now. He adjusted his cuff, barely looking at me. Look, Marcus, if Alina finds more life in my world than she does in your operating room, maybe that's a diagnosis you should have made years ago. That sentence told me everything I needed. Julian didn't think he was a symptom. He thought he was an upgrade. Men like that are easier to destroy because they can't imagine consequence until it's standing over them. I stepped closer, not threatening, just certain. You think you're the cause, I said quietly. You're just the test result, his smile flickered. Only once. Then it came back. I'll do whatever I want, and he walked away. Smug, untouched, still convinced I was the husband in denial. That was his mistake, because once I knew arrogance was part of his operating system, I knew exactly how to use it. That's when I found Sarah Ellers, Julian's wife. I reached out with one short message and one attachment. You may want to say this. She agreed to meet. Her house looked like old money trying not to brag about itself. White stone, black steel, silence so controlled it felt curated. Sarah opened the door in a navy dress, and the kind of composure you only see in people who learned a long time ago never to let panic perform in public. She looked through the photos once, then again, then set them down and poured herself mineral water like we were discussing a vendor contract. Julian has a pattern, she said. That was the first sentence out of her mouth. No denials, no melodramas, just precision. He finds women who feel overlooked and convinces them they're finally being seen. She met my eyes. He rebrands selfishness as intensity. I said nothing. She didn't need help continuing. He thinks he's self-made. He is. I financed the early years of his company, introduced him to the donor networks that keep him alive, and cleaned up 2 prior disasters he caused before he learned how to tailor a suit properly. Then she opened a drawer and slid a folder toward me. Prenup, highlighted. There was a morality clause so severe it almost made me smile. Public evidence of adultery or reputational harm would strip Julian of nearly everything he pretended to own. Business protections, asset control, lifestyle, the illusion of power. He thinks he's a lion, she said. Then she gave the slightest smile. He's a parasite. That was the moment I knew I wasn't dealing with another wounded spouse. I was dealing with an ally. And allies like Sarah don't want emotional closure. They want clean removals. So we built a plan. Not a screaming confrontation. Not a private plea. A public autopsy. The hospital awards ceremony gave us the perfect setting. Black ties. Donors. Surgeons. Board members. Spouses, reputation, a room full of people who understood appearance, status, and fallout. In other words, the exact kind of room where Julian and Alina would feel safest. Because reckless people always believe public visibility protects them. Sometimes it just guarantees witnesses. In the days before the ceremony, Alina was restless. That was the giveaway. She tried on multiple dresses, asked if the scarlet one was too much, checked her phone constantly, moved around the house like a woman with one foot still in her marriage, and the other already stepping into a fantasy. I told her the dress looked fine. She almost seemed disappointed. That told me more than any text message could have. She wanted friction. Friction would have given her a story. Calm gave her nowhere to hide. The night of the ceremony, the ballroom looked exactly like every expensive institutional event in America. White cloths, crystal glasses, expensive lilies, quiet piano. People pretending success had made them elegant instead of just well-dressed. I arrived alone. On purpose. Alina had told me she would meet me there after helping with last-minute donor logistics. That excuse alone would have been insulting if it hadn't already become predictable. I saw them before they saw me. Near the bars, her scarlet dress bright against the dark room. Julian angled toward her like possession had already become habit. She was laughing, really laughing, the kind of laugh that doesn't happen by accident. And for 1 second I felt it. Not jealousy, something older, heavier, grief. Because there she was, alive, lit up, expressive. And I realized that for months she'd been bringing the edited version of herself home to me while giving the unreduced version away to him. That feeling lasted maybe a second. Then it passed. Because grief is for something that can still be saved. I already knew this couldn't. They drifted toward a display of surgical breakthroughs, talking, smiling, bodies leaning in. Then Julian's hand moved from her waist down to her upper thigh. Slow, casual, possessive, that was the moment. Sarah stepped out of the crowd like final judgment in a navy dress. Julian, she said. He froze. You look surprised to see your wife at a medical ceremony. The sound in the room didn't stop. But it changed. You can always tell when a room smells rupture before it hears it. Julian turned white first, then red. Sarah, it's not stop, one word. Fled. Controlled. Surgical. I've seen enough, she said. So has Marcus. The clauses triggered. Alina's face changed. Not because she was ashamed. Because for the first time, she understood this wasn't going to stay private. Sarah took one step closer. This marriage is over, she told Julian. And so is your access to everything I funded for you. He actually opened his mouth like he still thought charm might be relevant. It was. Then Alina looked at me. That look is hard to describe. It wasn't love. It wasn't remorse. It was the exact moment someone realizes the version of reality they were counting on has been revoked. Marcus, she whispered. Please, I stepped close enough for her to hear me without forcing anyone else to. The data doesn't need an explanation, I said. It needs a signature, and then I walked away. That part matters. I didn't linger. I didn't argue. I didn't give the room a performance. Because the most powerful move in a moment like that is letting people feel the weight of what just happened without helping them metabolize it. The final break happened in our kitchen. Of course it did. That's where most real endings happen. Not in hotel rooms. Not in ballrooms. Not in the backseats of borrowed fantasies. In kitchens, near the place where children eat breakfast and bills are sorted, and ordinary life waits to see if it still exists. Alina came home after midnight. Her face had changed. Not ruined. Just stripped. The confidence was gone. What was left was panic. And panic talks fast. She started immediately. Lonely, neglected, confused. It didn't mean what it looked like. It never went that far. She didn't know how it happened. She felt invisible. She needed to feel alive again. I let her speak. Then I turned the tablet toward her. Car GPS logs, timestamp chains, hotel district routes, restaurant stops, private investigator photos, chronology, no angers, just evidence. She stared at it, then looked up at me. You tracked me? No, I said. I documented the collapse that landed. I saw it. This is insane. No, I told her. Insane would have been believing you after this. She started crying. Real tears, maybe even real regrets. But regret is not repair, and tears do not roll back decisions. I was lonely, she whispered again. I nodded once. I believe you. That surprised her. Then I finished the sentence. Loneliness is not a moral waiver. She took a step toward me. I stepped back, not dramatically, just enough to redraw reality. Then I went to the hallway table and picked up the divorce packet I had already prepared. When she saw it, something inside her shifted. Until that second, some part of her still believed this would stay flexible. That marriage was elastic. That history would save her. That if she said the right things in the right order, I would choose familiarity over truth. You already did this. I already accepted reality. For the kids, she said. That line comes fast when people realize romance is over and consequence has started. Please, Marcus. For the kids, I looked at her for a long moment. You should have thought about them before you started building a second life. She flinched. That was the first honest reaction I'd seen from her in weeks. The next several days moved like surgery. Deliberate, attorney meetings, parenting schedule drafts, financial separation, school counselor coordination, so the children would have support without carrying adult details they didn't need. Alina cycled through every register. Regret, seduction, blame, memory, fear. One afternoon, she stood in my office doorway holding our wedding album. We were happy, she said. I looked at the albums, then at her. No, I said. We were stable. You confuse stability with emptiness. The children handled it the way children do. Quietly, our son got still. Our daughter got observant. I told them what mattered and nothing more. That their mother and I were separating. That it wasn't because of them. That both of us loved them. That the shape of our lives would change, but their value wouldn't. Children don't need the pathology. They need the truth in a form their nervous system can survive. A week later, I stood in the courthouse. The air smelled like paper, dust, and endings that had been repeated so many times the walls had stopped reacting. I signed the page, handed it to the clerk, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to stillness. Alina was standing behind me, smaller than I remembered. Not physically, structurally, as if the fantasy she had been standing inside had collapsed. And now she was just a woman in the ruins of her own choices. Marcus, she said softly, can't we try one more time? I turned and looked at her. Really looked. I saw the woman I married. The mother of my children. The woman who once sat on the floor of our first apartment eating takeout with me because we didn't own a table yet. The woman who used to laugh so hard she cried. And I saw the woman who had looked me in the eye and called me paranoid while feeding a lie with both hands. You already made the decision, I said. I'm just confirming it. Then I walked out. I drove home in silence. No music, no calls, no dramatic release. Just road, breath, motion. Inside the house, I stopped in the hallway and looked at our wedding photo. We looked impossibly young, like two people who thought making a promise and meaning it once would somehow protect that promise forever. I reached up and took the frame off the wall. No ceremony, no speech, no shattered glass. I carried it to the kitchen and set it gently in the trash. That gentleness mattered to me. Violence would have suggested passion, and passion was over. What remained was release. That night after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch in the old wooden chair that always squeaked when I leaned back. The neighborhood was still. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and rain. And for the first time in months, maybe longer, I realized I wasn't waiting for anything. Not for a door to open. Not for an excuse. Not for a lie dressed up as reconciliation. Nothing in me was bracing anymore. The body knows when the threat has left the room. My pulse was steady, not joyful, not triumphant, just steady. People think freedom arrives like a victory speech. It doesn't. Sometimes it arrives like silence that no longer feels dangerous. Sometimes it sounds like a porch chair in the dark. Sometimes it sounds like your own life finally returning to you. I sat there and thought about all the years I'd spent listening to damaged hearts, trying to save them, trying to restore flow, trying to protect life from collapse. And I realized something I should have understood sooner. Not every system is meant to be preserved. Some systems survive by hiding infection. Some survive by compensation. Some survive by making one person bleed quietly so the structure can keep pretending to function. Until one day the truth becomes cleaner than the marriage. That was the night I finally accepted it. I hadn't lost everything. I had just stopped lying to myself. The porch creaked again as I leaned back and looked into the dark. Inside the house, everything was quiet. No more diagnostics, no more bargainings, no more false alarms. For the first time in 12 years, I could hear the silence clearly. And it didn't sound like loss. It sounded like freedom.